Hi everybody, this is Herb Pedersen, and you're listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton on 3SER KC Radio.
Wait a minute, did I hear you say you're going far away again?
Just to go way back to begin with, do you have an earliest musical memory from your childhood when you can recall music becoming an important part of your life?
Yes, it was in Oakland, California in 1961 or 2 when I was still in high school. My friend and I had a small bluegrass band, and we played at this pizza parlor, and it was the first time we'd ever played in front of an audience, and it was wonderful, you know. And I knew at that point I wanted to be a professional.
What do you think it was about at that young age? What do you think it was about bluegrass that appealed to you in particular?
Well, I didn't like the singing at first, which is pretty amazing because now I love the singing. But back then, being brought up in California, we weren't used to that type of singing, so it was all I could do to kind of get through a vocal, a tune, without thinking, why do they sound like that? So I fell in love with the banjo. That was the first thing.
Yeah.
Then I liked, I guess the dobro, and then the guitar, and the mandolin, and the fiddle, probably in that order. And but it was just a strange kind of music that I just fell in love with the sound of it, and I can't explain why, because my parents did not listen to bluegrass music. It was just something that happened in that period of my life, when folk music was really starting to get into the urban areas.
Now, I believe you're pretty much self-taught as far as the banjo goes. Do you think you'd be a different type of player today had you gone down the traditional path of formal lessons?
Well, I don't know, because back then there weren't a lot of banjo teachers. We had to kind of learn on our own and by listening to records. So a lot of us are self-taught because out on the West Coast, you didn't get enough live bluegrass music to be able to learn anything. So you had to kind of go from records. And that's basically how I taught myself, listening to people like Earl Scruggs and Sonny Osborne and Alan Shelton, who was with Jim and Jesse, and people like that,
Tell us about the Pine Valley Boys, an early band for you. How do you look back on that time now as in terms of your development as a working musician?
Well, Butch Waller and myself started the band back in the early 60s, very early 60s, and we ended up with David Nelson on guitar and Butch on mandolin, and I was playing banjo. And our bass player was Dale Hollis, who was a really fine bass player. He was really good. And we had a reunion a while back of the Pine Valley Boys, and it was a lot of fun. We had a great time. This was a couple of years ago. And let's see. We would play local things up in the Bay Area, Northern California, Central California. We didn't go on the road very much. Traveling back then was kind of an effort because, people weren't used to touring that kind of music, so especially out west. So we just played local coffee houses and local festivals, that kind of thing.
You had a brief period playing with Lester Flatt at a time when Earl Scruggs was out of action. That must have been an exciting experience for a young player as yourself at the time.
Oh, yes, it was amazing. I had moved to Nashville and was working with Vern and Ray, who were a duet that lived in California, and we all moved back there to see if we could get some work. And this was like 1967. And I was there for about 2 months when I got a phone call from Earl Scruggs, and he had asked me to come over to his house to have a little chat. He had seen me on a local TV show. And so I did. At first, though, I thought somebody was kidding me. I thought it was somebody from out in California just having a joke with me, you know. And so I did go over to his house, and I met him, and he was a wonderful man, very, very giving person. And we chatted for a while, and then we played some music together. He played guitar, and he wanted me to play banjo. And so he kind of checked me out as far as the tunes that I knew that Flatt and Scruggs did, and so we played most of them. And then he told me what his plan was. He said, I have to go back in the hospital for an operation, and would I care to work with Lester and the boys, you know, for a few weeks while he was recuperating. And I said, I couldn't believe it, you know, and I said, sure, I'd be honored to. You think I can do it? And he said, oh, yeah, no, you know the material. So that was that, you know. And that Friday night, he took me down to the Grand Ole Opry and introduced me to Lester and the rest of the band. And we got on the Martha White bus and took off that night for Virginia. So that was my introduction to that.
Mm. And later you got to replace Doug Dillard in the Dillards, which would have been big shoes to fill at that time. Did you feel a bit of pressure on you going into that role?
You know, I really didn't. When I got off the road with Flatt, I got a call from Dean Webb, who was out here in California, and he wanted to know what my plans were. And I said, well, I was thinking about moving back to California. He said, well, you know, we have a spot open in the band. Douglas left the group, and you know, I've always liked your playing, and would you consider auditioning for the part? And I said, sure. So I came back out, and I got the job, and so I moved back out here to California from Nashville. And it was very interesting. I didn't feel any kind of pressure from the band as much as I did from the people, because they expected me to be, you know, from Missouri, and I wasn't. I was from California, and so there were some disappointed people. And I wasn't trying to replace Douglas. I was just trying to do what I do, you know. So
yeah.
There were some people that, you know, had a problem with that, and there were some people who really liked the change, you know. So, but I was very supported in that whole thing by the rest of the guys in the group. So. Some
albums you were involved with during your time with the Dillards, such as Wheat Straw Sweet and Copperfields, are seen as groundbreaking albums now, heralding in that country rock theme. Do you remember at the time feeling you were part of some new territory being charted?
Well, you know, back then, the music that we were playing was very experimental. You know, we were allowed to try different things in the studio. The music budgets for those records weren't very much, but, you know, it was at a time when we needed to try new things, you know, as opposed to just playing a straight bluegrass tune. We tried, you know, writing our own material, and we also tried doubling vocals and trying different instrumentation. And that was basically what we were doing. We were just trying something new. We didn't know that we were at that cutting edge of you know, the country rock scene. You know, we were more bluegrass oriented, but we delved into the country music thing just to see what we could do, and that's the way those turned out.
Yeah. Now, after that, you got involved with Country Gazette, but not to a great extent. Were you a little reluctant at that time to involve yourself heavily in a band situation again?
Yes, because I had children at that time, and I needed to, you know, make some money and stay home, and I was busy in the recording studio working for other people, so I didn't really want to go on the road that much. So what I decided to do was just to, you know, work with the Country Gazette on records, but not go on the road with them, and that's when they got Alan Mundy to come in.
You, in the 70s, as you say, got involved in some session work and did some wonderful sessions. Any standout memories there?
Well, a lot of them do, but, you know, it was just a time when I was doing probably, I would say 8 to 10 sessions a week, you know, which for me was good. You know, there are a lot of musicians in L.A. that were working a lot more than that, but the kind of music I was involved with to do 8 to 10 sessions a week was a lot, because there weren't that many bluegrass-oriented groups. So I concentrated on learning more rhythm guitar stuff and working on harmony vocals, doing a lot of background vocals for different people like Linda Ronstadt and Jackson Brown and Emmylou Harris and people like that. So I had my chances to experiment in that regard.
In your session work, you did, as you say, back up a lot of singer-songwriter types. In those situations, was there anything in particular you paid attention to doing just right to provide the right backup in a situation where the lyrics, I guess, are such a main factor?
Could you say that again? You kind of broke up
there.
Yeah,
sure. Well, what elements of being a session musician did you find most important when backing up singer-songwriter types? Because I guess the lyrics are probably the main thing that people listen out for. Is it a subtlety, I guess, in the backing that you're looking for?
Well, you know what it is with me as a singer, I try to sound as much like the singer that I'm singing with as possible.
Oh yeah.
Because I think a vocal blend is really important, and a lot of people kind of overlook that for the sake of something else. I don't know exactly what, but as far as I'm concerned, the person who's singing lead is the one that you should be listening to, and try to get as close to their vocal part as possible with your harmonies.
You've worked with some wonderful musicians through the years. I've already mentioned some, but you also got to work with the great White brothers, Clarence and Roland, just before Clarence's unfortunate death. What are your memories of that experience?
Oh, it was great. I mean, Clarence and Roland and Eric, we went to Holland, and we did actually a live radio show that I think the tape is floating around out there somewhere. It was 1973, and I was over there briefly for part of the tour, and then Alan Mundy came out and took over for me. But we got, it was always great working with Clarence and Roland because they really embraced what bluegrass was all about, and they were fabulous players and great guys. I'd known them for a long time, being living here in LA, and Clarence was just a great guy to play music with because he was such a genius at what he did, and he had a wonderful sense of humor, and he was very accessible as a musician. He wasn't stuck up or anything. He liked to play, which is what it's all about. So. And with Roland, too, the same thing. He's a wonderful man, and I see him now from time to time when we go to Nashville, and he's a great guy, and love playing with him.
Do you think we ever got to hear the best of what Clarence was capable of?
Yeah, I think, if you heard, that all-acoustic thing that he did, where it's just instrumentals with Roger Bush, it was just the two of them, I think at either Roger's house or Clarence's house, and they just had the tape recorder going, and they did, Soldier's Joy and tunes like that. Yeah, I think Clarence gave everybody what they were listening for, not only on his acoustic work, but also with his, string bender and his Telecaster work. I thought was very good. He learned a lot from James Burton. He would go over to James' house and learn Telecaster type things, so he was always looking for ways to get better, which was really a salute to him. He never was satisfied with his playing, as I don't think anybody is that's very good. You always want to be better. And so I mean, I'm still, I'm 65 now, and I still, I teach banjo here at home when I'm not on the road, and I always come up with new little things that I want to incorporate in my playing now, and like it's as important now as it was back when I was a kid. And I just think that anybody who starts playing an instrument should push it as far as they can, Do
you find that teaching sometimes becomes a learning experience for yourself?
Oh, all the time. Like I just said, I have some students who are advanced players, and they'll show me something that they're working on, and I'll try to straighten out what they're doing, but then I'll come across something, here's a different way of doing it, and, so it's a learning experience all the time for me.
Now, someone you've had a long association with and still with is Chris Hillman. Do you remember the first time you met Chris?
It was probably at the Troubadour in L.A., I think about 1963, and he was in the Golden State Boys. playing mandolin with Don Parmalee and Vernon Rex Gosden.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the Pine Valley Boys, and there was an open mic situation there on Monday nights. And so everybody from David Crosby to Roger McGuinn to Phil Oakes, lots of different folk artists and bluegrass bands would come sign up to play at the Troubadour on Monday nights. And that's probably where I met Chris, yeah. So I've known him the longest, I think, of anybody in the music business that I know.
So tell us about the formation of the Desert Rose Band, how the stepping stones were put in place there to get that band together.
The Desert Rose Band was formed after, let's see, I worked on a Dan Fogelberg album called High Country Snows,
mm-hmm.
and Chris played on some of that, and Dan was going to go out and promote the album, and he wanted us to put together some kind of quartet to open for him as an acoustic group, and then he would come out and do some of the tunes off the High Country Snows album with us. And so that was Chris, John Jorgensen, and Bill Bryson. And Bill was playing upright bass, John was playing more lead guitar, acoustic guitar, and mandolin, and Chris was playing mandolin and guitar as well. And I was playing banjo. And that was the beginning of that sound. And then when the tour was over, John suggested to Chris that, gee, maybe we should plug this in and see what it would sound if it was an electric group. So we got J.D. Manus involved and Steve Duncan, and that was the formation of the Desert Rose Band.
So in the end, did it turn out to be the band you initially planned it to be? Was the blueprint for the band a good match for how the band actually ended up, or did it evolve over time?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The Desert Rose Band, did it actually end up in the end being the band that you initially set it out to be, or was it something that evolved through time?
I think it really very quickly evolved into what we wanted to do
mm-hmm.
musically. And, we just did a reunion tour here last year, and we had a couple of days rehearsal, and it sounded better than it did when we were together back in the 80s and 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is healthy. Everybody likes each other still, and which is very odd for a band, that had as long a run as we did. We were together for like 8 or 9 years, and we had some personnel changes, but we got the original band together last year, and it sounded great.
You had a very, very successful period with that band. When did you know the time was right to leave it all behind and move on to something else?
Well, there were a lot of reasons. John wanted to go on and work on his jazz music, Django Reinhardt kind of stuff. Chris had 2 little children at home that he needed to spend more time with, and I was ready to move on and do, more of a bluegrass type of thing and do more session work here in town. So I would say, after 8 years, we kind of looked at each other and said, you know what, let's drop it now, why we still like each other, and we'll move on and do other things.
Yeah, leave while you're on a high.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that's what we did,
When you put together the Laurel Canyon Ramblers, were you specifically looking to get back to your musical roots there, so to speak?
Yes, and exactly, and it was actually my wife's suggestion. She said, you're in there playing the banjo all the time. Why don't you put something together and go have some fun with it? And so I said, you know what, you're right. So I called Bill, and Bill was ready to do something. And so he and I put the band together. He suggested Kenny Blackwell on mandolin, and I guess Billy Ray was our first guitar player, and he wasn't doing much of anything. And so the 4 of us got together, and it sounded pretty good. It was fun, and I could concentrate more on banjo stuff. And Bill is a great MC, so he liked talking to the people and all that. So it worked out really well. And then Billy Ray left, and we got Roger Reed to replace him on guitar. And we had Gabe Witcher on fiddle, who is a wonderful fiddle player, young guy, and now he works with Chris Thiele in the Punch Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is a hot little band. They're all over the place now. So that was the original band.
And being a working musician for as long as you have now, and you've no doubt clocked up thousands and thousands of miles in travel, does it still have the same appeal to you after all these years, the touring side of things?
You know, I'll paraphrase Buck Owens, and our good friend who passed away a couple of years ago. He said to us one time, we were working at his club up in Bakersfield, Chris and I, and he said, you know, I still love playing. It's the getting there that gets me, you know. It's just traveling, you know, because, you know, we're not young guys anymore, you know, and it's hard getting around, and you know, airplanes are not what they used to be, and the crowds in the airports and all that stuff, you know. Sometimes we have to drive several hundred miles after we, you know, been flying all day to get to a certain club or festival or whatever, so it takes its toll on you.
Yeah.
So anymore, when Chris and I go out, it's usually for like a long weekend, and that's about it.
Right. So it's a quality of work now you're looking at more than a quantity.
Exactly right. 'Cause
Yeah.
we don't really have to prove anything anymore, and so we're having a good time. People know who we are, and those who want to hire us do. And as a matter of fact, I just ran into Dean Webb, who was the mandolin player in the Dillards. We were back in West Plains, Missouri last week, and he came with his wife to the show, and we got him up there, and we did some tunes together, and it was great. You know, a lot of fun.
Fantastic.
So there are those special moments, you know, that you know, share your memories with your old bandmates and all that. But the travel is still, you know, the hardest thing right now for us.
Sure. And just before I let you go, Herb, what's in the books now? What do you got coming up in terms of plans for the rest of the year?
Well, for the rest of the year, we're doing, you know, just little road trips. We're going back east, middle of July, for several days, and then we have some festivals and club dates in the Midwest, and then down into Nashville. And Chris and I are going to do a live album of acoustic music in November, which we're working on putting that together. And so, you know, little by little, we're still hammering away at it, trying to get better.
Fantastic. Herb, great to catch up with you. Thanks so much for taking the time out to speak to us today.
Okay, John.
Congratulations on an outstanding contribution to some wonderful music through the decades.
Thank you, and I hope we can come over to your country one of these days.
Oh, we'd love to see you. I don't think we'd let you go once you got here.
Okay, buddy.
All the best, Herb.
Thanks, John. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.